Oh, I think I have a mic on. Okay. I'm really excited to be here today. It's great to see you all. And I hope to just give you sort of a flavor of some nutrition essentials for NET patients, what to eat, and I hope to give you an idea of why we make these recommendations. So what I'm going to focus on today is just three major topics, just some healthy eating basics, nutrition and cancer treatment, and then a subtopic of carcinoid syndrome and diet. So just to look at healthy eating basics, I put this slide up here. It's from the American Institute of Cancer Research, and they do all the research that's looking at diet, physical activity, and the food and our body weight and how that impacts cancer risk and also cancer survivors' lifestyle changes. And they've come up with these three core recommendations based on thousands of studies that they reviewed that are associated with about a 30% reduced risk of developing cancer. And those are to choose mostly plant foods, limit red meat and processed meat, include regular physical activity with a goal of 30 minutes or more a day, and aim to be a healthy weight throughout life. The good news is that they've actually come up with 10 more detailed recommendations. So for any of you that really want to delve more into these, and I hope you do, I would recommend that you go on the AICR.org website, and they have more details on how to make these recommendations, how to implement them into your lifestyle. And the number 10 recommendation, which you probably can't even see, so I'll read it to you, says, after treatment, cancer survivors should follow the recommendations for cancer prevention. And the reason they make this recommendation is because there's more and more studies looking at people after they've been diagnosed with cancer, after they've gone through treatment, and found that the same type of recommendations that reduce the risk of developing cancer also help improve odds after a cancer diagnosis. So I haven't found any individual studies looking at NET patients and diet and lifestyle interventions. I hope maybe those will be coming in the future. But we have a lot of studies with breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, some of the more common cancers, showing that following the guidelines of eating more vegetables, more plant-based, exercising regularly, and staying at a healthy body weight does improve quality of life, overall survival, and just improve health after a cancer diagnosis. So what do we mean when we say a plant-based diet? I like this picture. I think it's an easy way to put that into perspective into your daily life. And basically, if your plate holds 2/3 or more plant foods, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, you're eating a plant-based diet. 1/3 or less coming from meat, poultry, dairy products, fish. Why is a plant-based diet recommended? Well, it's generally been associated with a lower risk of developing almost any disease. That doesn't mean that if you follow these guidelines, you're not going to get that disease, but just overall, the association is that people that are following a plant-based diet have about a 30–35% lower risk of getting most types of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, pretty much all of our chronic diseases. Why is it so beneficial? When you're eating more plant foods, you're getting more of the health-protecting substances. So things like vitamins, minerals, these little compounds called phytochemicals, which are the colorful compounds in the fruits and vegetables that we eat that protect our cells from damage that can lead to cancer, cause inflammation that can cause other health problems. And then it also starts edging out some of the less healthy things that we can get from food that could be on our plate. So things like too much animal protein, too much animal fat, sugars, salt, additives, preservatives, things like that. So it's kind of a twofold thing. And one thing to think about is it's really a whole eating pattern. There's no magic bullet food. If you read a study that says asparagus cures cancer, don't believe it. Asparagus is part of a healthy plant-based diet, is a good thing to include in your diet, but there's really no magic bullet food. It's really looking at a whole eating pattern and a whole lifestyle. Just to look at physical activity, also we know that our bodies are really designed to move. So being inactive and being sedentary, that's unnatural. We're actually supposed to be physically active every day, regularly. In cancer survivors or people that are diagnosed with cancer, exercise has been shown to improve heart health, muscle strength, body composition, so less fat, more muscle, more lean body mass. It's been associated with less fatigue, anxiety, and depression, helping with self-esteem, happiness, aids in weight management, and many studies have actually shown that it can lower the risk of recurrence and lengthen life after a cancer diagnosis. So the goal is eventually to try to get to at least 30 minutes most days. But if you can't do that, they've even shown that doing something consistently, even for 5 minutes a day, can have benefits. That can be chair exercises. It doesn't have to be, anything like running a marathon. If you can't walk, there's still exercises that you can do that you can get benefits from. Their third big recommendation focuses on a healthy body weight. I know for a lot of people that are going through cancer treatment, we're struggling to maintain weight, but that's not really the picture for the general world population, and certainly in America, if we look at all of the age groups, 30% of us are in the obese category. And being obese is actually really significantly not just associated with a higher risk of heart disease and diabetes, but with a lot of cancers. There's a big connection between obesity and many of the common cancers. So what they found is that being at a healthy body weight is protective against cancer. I wanted to highlight one nutrient that I feel like most people don't get enough of. We definitely don't get enough vegetables. We don't get enough fruits. Many studies have shown that. But most Americans also don't get enough of these essential fatty acids. So there are certain fats that you need in your diet, and these are called our omega-3 fatty acids. Why are they important? They're important for our heart health. They're important for our mood. They're important for decreasing inflammatory chemicals in our body that can cause cancer-related weight loss and fatigue in people that have cancer, and they also help our immune system work better. And studies show that Americans are not getting enough of these, so definitely something we need to do better on. Why aren't we getting enough? Well, if you look at the food sources, not a lot of people are eating certain particular types of fish that are high in omega-3s, so wild salmon, trout, herring, sablefish, sardines. Sardines are the little tiny fishy fish. They're great because they're super low in mercury, but they're very high in these omega-3s. Then we can get them from plant sources, so things like flaxseed, walnuts, pumpkin seeds, and chia seeds. Again, things that a lot of us aren't eating that much of in our diet. So how do you make sure you're getting a good amount of omega-3s to be getting the beneficial effects? Aim for a plant source every day if you can. So pumpkin seeds in your oatmeal in the morning, or flaxseed meal in your smoothie is a great way to make sure you're getting a plant source. And then also, if you can include fish twice a week, particularly those high omega-3 fish, about a 3 to 4 ounce, or like a deck of cards serving, and that would give you a pretty significant amount of omega-3s. If you're not able to do that, that's when we might look at doing like a fish oil supplement, a good quality fish oil supplement. There's also a little bit of evidence to show that omega-3s can protect the heart from some of the negative effects of serotonin that can be damaging for people with carcinoid tumors. One other nutrient I wanted to highlight was vitamin D, because that's another thing that as Americans we are not getting enough of. I'm sure you've all read about our low rates of vitamin D around the world and in the United States. And the primary reason for that is if you think about where we get it, when we're out in the sun, we produce vitamin D. So it's like a hormone that our body produces when we're exposed to the sun. But we spend a lot of time indoors and we're not getting very much sun anymore. So we're not getting the level of vitamin D that our body needs for our immune system to work properly, for our cells to develop properly. It also shows, again, to reduce that inflammation that's linked with health problems. And it helps with our bone health and our muscle strength. So we get it from, again, sunlight. Those fatty fish are a good source, eggs, and then fortified foods and dietary supplements. So the studies are really vary on how much we need, but adults need at least 600 international units of vitamin D3 per day. And this is one where I think for some people it's really important to get a vitamin D blood test so they can actually check the vitamin D levels in your blood to see if you have a good amount. And for people that are having chronic diarrhea as a side effect of their treatment, or if they're having malabsorption, they may be particularly susceptible to having low levels of vitamin D because it's a fat-soluble vitamin. So if you're having diarrhea or malabsorbing, you're probably low in vitamin D. And then I think it's definitely a good idea to get the test to figure out what the right amount of supplementation is for you. So just to summarize the healthy diet guidelines and then kind of move into some other topics. We want a balanced diet with a variety of foods, but focusing on more plant foods. So fruits and vegetables of intense color. The darker the vegetables and fruits you eat, the darker leafy greens you eat instead of iceberg lettuce, the more nutrients you're getting, the more vitamin K, vitamin C, the more phytochemicals, those protective substances. Choosing whole grains over refined grains, so that would be quinoa, brown rice, 100% whole grain bread. Choosing lean and plant protein sources, limiting added sugars and fats, kind of the empty calories that are just causing our society to become and remain obese, not nutrient-dense foods, and getting adequate fluids while limiting sugary drinks and alcohol, being physically active, maintaining a healthy weight. And then for those of you that are in treatment, we need to think about how might you need to modify your diet to manage the side effects of your treatment. And that's what I want to talk about next, because I think that's equally as important as eating a healthy, very healthy, balanced diet. This is where it really comes into, again, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach, because each individual person that's going through a cancer diagnosis may be having very individual issues related to the treatment or to their cancer that make those healthy eating guidelines not always applicable to them. It could be from nutrition-related side effects of treatment, if it's deficiencies because of an intestinal surgery that they've had, diarrhea, weight loss, which can be a big challenge for some people. If they have a specific type of tumor, if they have carcinoid syndrome, there may be specific recommendations. They might have other medical issues that are causing them to have to follow a different diet, whether it's diabetes or kidney problems. So again, you always want to go back to the healthy eating recommendations, but maybe how am I different, or what would make somebody make a recommendation that might go away from that and not feel like you're doing the wrong thing because you might be going away from those healthy eating guidelines because of a specific issue for you. So, when we think about nutrition-related side effects of treatment, there's a laundry list here. We've got a whole, several bullet points of problems that can arise from treatments or from the cancer itself. And I always think of this as, I always picture like somebody running through an obstacle course trying to drink water. I mean, that can be very difficult. So just even meeting your basic food needs, your basic calorie needs, your basic protein needs can suddenly become extremely challenging when you're faced with nausea and diarrhea and poor appetite, and you're so tired that you can't even think about putting a bite of food in your mouth. So, just kind of keep that in mind, that these can be very profound difficulties that we need to focus on. We need to get your basic needs met first. So I'm just going to focus on one of these side effects because we could spend a long time, and since it's before lunch, I figured I'd focus on diarrhea. No, I'm talking about diarrhea because I think it's probably one of the most common side effects with people that have neuroendocrine tumors, because there's a variety of different causes. It might be from carcinoid syndrome. It might be because of treatments that you're having. It might be because of intestinal surgeries that you've had. So there's a variety of causes, but it's a very common side effect that comes up. And so I want to focus on just some of the simple things that can be done to help manage diarrhea, because it's not something that you just have to accept. I'm not saying we could make it completely go away, but I think there's always a way that it can be better or improve so that your quality of life can be better and that you can feel better. So the first thing I would say is when you're having diarrhea frequently, which is 4 loose bowel movements or more per day, you need to replace fluids and electrolytes. You're going to be losing a lot of fluid and a lot of sodium and potassium in those loose stools. And so thinking about sipping on liquids all day, replacing potassium through things like bananas and melons and coconut water, getting more sodium to replace sodium from sports drinks like Propel or Recharge or broth, or salty foods like saltine and pretzels, because those electrolytes have important functions in your body and you need to make sure that you're not getting dehydrated. The next thing is to look at how can we decrease the demands on your intestinal tract. So how can we make that intestinal tract a little less stressed? And the first thing I would say is eat smaller meals more often. The smaller your meal, the easier it is for you to digest. If you're eating a big meal, it's probably going to cause some distress in an already distressed system. Chewing your foods very well, it's a very simple thing to do, but a lot of us eat quickly, we don't think about chewing our food and don't realize that a lot of the digestive process is already happening when we're chewing our food. Limit foods or substances that irritate your intestinal tract. So high doses of magnesium can cause diarrhea. Caffeine can definitely trigger diarrhea. And then extreme temperatures, so a very hot cup of tea or hot cup of coffee or a very cold food can stimulate your intestinal tract and irritate it. Fatty and greasy foods should be really minimized or limited. So pizza, fried chicken, and cheeseburgers are not good foods to eat when you're having intestinal problems. You want to stick with more basic foods that are baked, steamed, things that are not going to put a lot of stress on your system. And then concentrated sweets, so things that are really sweet, like think of a very sweet fruit juice. Fruit juice or really sweet desserts can actually trigger a lot of stress on your intestinal tract. So if you're drinking juice, you'd want to dilute it way down, make it at least 50% juice, 50% water. And then there's something called sugar alcohols, which sugar alcohols are found in a lot of diet foods. They're sorbitol or mannitol. And they're also in a lot of liquid medications, and we don't digest these foods. So they can irritate your intestinal tract, and that's going to lead to more loose stools, more diarrhea. So look on labels of foods, and if you see the word sorbitol, mannitol, if you're having GI distress, find a substitute. Limiting lactose can be helpful. Lactose is the carbohydrate that's in dairy products, and if you already were lactose intolerant, which a lot of people are, it's not going to go away once you have a neuroendocrine tumor. It's probably going to get worse. So if you weren't lactose intolerant before, sometimes having a surgery or being under a specific treatment that affects your intestinal system, you can suddenly become lactose intolerant. So suddenly before you could drink a glass of milk, but now when you drink a glass of milk, you get really gassy and bloated and have some loose stools. So if that's the case for you, think about using lactose-free milk or dairy alternatives, so things like almond milk or rice milk. Yogurt is usually fairly well tolerated because it's fermented, so all the lactose is broken down. And then we also have lactate pills or dairy digestive pills that you could take when you're eating a dairy product that can help you digest those foods and make them a little easier on your system. Avoiding gas-forming foods and foods high in insoluble fiber can help. So gas-forming foods are things like onions, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, soft drinks or carbonated drinks, and chewing gum actually causes a lot of gas to be produced in the intestinal tract. Insoluble fiber is the kind of fiber that's the skins and the seeds of your vegetables and fruits, so all the outside, usually all the outside. And basically what it does is it doesn't get digested, so it just moves through your intestinal tract very quickly, and it causes you to have more loose stools. So if you're struggling with diarrhea, you want to limit your high fiber foods like raw, unpeeled fruits, dried fruits, raw vegetables, whole grain breads, cereals, nuts, and seeds. So this is a time where, eating a plant-based diet may not be, it's not that you can't eat a plant-based diet, but you might need to eat smaller portions or have them cooked, eat the type that are easier to digest versus going with a big raw salad and lots of fibrous grains. Which foods are going to be easy for you to digest in the case of diarrhea? Low fiber, or what we call low residue foods. So these are things like white rice or rice porridge, which is called congee. peeled potatoes, cream of wheat, cooked vegetables and fruits, and bananas. These are low in fiber, and they tend to be easy on your digestive system. Another kind of fiber that we get from our food that can actually help reduce diarrhea is called soluble fiber. And soluble fiber turns to gel in your digestive system and slows everything down, and so it decreases your loose stools. And examples of really good high soluble fiber foods would be oat bran, barley, bananas, applesauce, cooked carrots, and then you can also use soluble fiber supplements, but you have to make sure that if you're using a fiber supplement for this reason, that it says soluble fiber, not insoluble fiber. So Benefiber would be a good example of a soluble fiber supplement. So this is just one example. So, you know, I've gone through in detail some things you could do in terms of diarrhea management. But think about this when you're thinking about other side effects that you might have. This is how your healthcare team can help you, whether it's your oncologist, your oncology nurse, your oncology dietitian. We have a lot of tricks up our sleeves, and we can kind of help you try to figure out what it is that might be causing problems and how you can, you know, get around that obstacle course. There might be, you know, many other hints that we have, medications, modifications that can help you control your symptoms. And just one example of that would be, for example, if somebody's had a Whipple surgery where they've had part of their pancreas removed for their neuroendocrine tumor, or if they've been on long-term octreotide treatment, they might develop malabsorption where they can't absorb all the fat from their diet or just absorb all the nutrients from their diet, and that might be why they're having diarrhea. So, you know, that's where we could prescribe pancreatic enzymes. So basically enzymes that you take that your body normally produces, but maybe it isn't producing anymore, or it's producing them, but they're just not getting to the food at the right time. But you can take those in a prescription when you eat, and it can actually help you break down and absorb your food, which means you're able to gain weight, you're not having as much diarrhea, you're able to absorb your medications better, you're able to you know, maintain your vitamin stores better. So there's a lot of tricks like that that you know, definitely talk to your healthcare team if you are having side effects. Now just to focus a little bit on carcinoid syndrome. It doesn't, you know, affect a huge amount of people, but it's definitely, in terms of, you know, neuroendocrine tumors, it's something that diet can have a big impact on. And I'm sure you already probably heard about the symptoms of carcinoid syndrome probably earlier today, but the symptoms include flushing, sweating, wheezing, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. And the common triggers, well, the hormone secretions from the tumor is one of the really common triggers. And also certain foods that we eat can actually be triggers. And even stress can be a trigger, or some people report certain exercise or the temperature outside can be a trigger. But if you have symptoms, diet changes definitely may help. So again, I always go back to that you're unique, and I think Josh said he was an N of 1, so you're an N of 1 in figuring out what might be triggering carcinoid syndrome in you. I mean, there's definitely themes that we know about, but not everybody's going to be the same, and honestly, I've seen so many different individual triggers from people that I would always say, you know, individualize the strategies, and if you have carcinoid syndrome, if you can possibly keep a journal of when you're getting the symptoms and a food log, I think it'd be really helpful so you know what works and what doesn't. So that way you don't have to unnecessarily cut something out of your diet that may not really be impacting your symptoms at all. What are the most common reported food triggers? So they've done surveys and found out that the most common reported triggers are large meals, fatty meals, alcohol, very spicy food. So not spices like cinnamon, but things like hot spices, chilies, kind of hot spices. And then foods that contain something called amines. And amines are basically precursors to chemicals in our body that can cause the carcinoid tumors to secrete more of the hormones and cause more of the carcinoid syndrome symptoms. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those are. So if you don't have any symptoms, if you don't have carcinoid syndrome, then this doesn't really apply to you. Or if you have a carcinoid tumor but you have no symptoms, you don't have to follow these recommendations. Kind of go back to the healthy eating guidelines. If you do have symptoms, the first thing I would say is if diarrhea is one of them, follow the earlier recommendations or suggestions that I made for diarrhea management. The second thing that we recommend is to increase the protein content of your diet, because one of the things that happens is when the carcinoid tumors are producing their hormones that cause the syndrome, they're actually diverting the amino acid tryptophan from you to produce those substances, and that can lead to a deficiency in niacin. And so by eating more protein in the diet, you can actually offset that. And so we usually increase a person's needs up to 1.5 grams per kilogram. I'm not going to do the calculation for you, but just so you know, the regular RDA is about 0.8 grams per kilogram. So we want to get a significant amount of excess protein in the diet to help offset this. What are good sources of protein? Again, fish, poultry, lean meats, beans, eggs, egg whites, low-fat dairy products. If somebody's having a hard time meeting their protein needs, I'll often recommend like a protein powder to make into a smoothie. The other thing that we recommend for people that are having symptoms is to add niacin to the diet. It's not a huge dose. Niacin is vitamin B3, but again, that helps ensure that you have enough niacin to avoid a deficiency. And it's only 25 to 50 milligrams of niacin or nicotinamide, which is the no-flush niacin. So this is much, much lower than what you'd ever see in being prescribed for cholesterol or anything like that. So it's a very tiny amount. And then the last thing is to consume these foods that are low in amines. And so what are these foods that are high in amines? What I've done is basically break it down into two groups so that you can see what foods are the foods that are highest in amines. These are the foods in the red box that are most likely to trigger symptoms. So if somebody comes in to me and they're having a lot of symptoms, I would say, let's start with these most common triggers. Aged cheeses, aged meats, smoked salted fish and meats, so things like smoked salmon, for example, or like a smoked lunch meat. Aged cheeses, blue cheese, some of the aged cheeses. Alcohol is fairly high in amines. Yeast extracts, which you're going to find in processed foods. So if you look at the label of canned soups or frozen foods, you might see these yeast extracts, and they'll be labeled exactly that. It'll say yeast extract. Brewer's yeast, and then fermented foods. So the fermentation process increases the amine content of foods. So things like tofu, miso, and sauerkraut are high in amines. So those are the highest. Those are most likely to trigger symptoms. And then we have foods that have moderate amounts of amines. And so these may trigger carcinoid symptoms in some people, but it's less common, I'll just say that. So this would be coffee, caffeine, colas, chocolate, especially dark chocolate, peanuts, Brazil nuts, coconut, avocados, bananas, raspberries, and then most other soybean products, and then fava beans. And so, typically you may be able to tolerate a little bit of these foods, but if you eat a significant amount, potentially it could be a trigger for carcinoid symptoms. So what can you eat? People say, well, that's a long list. I love those foods. What can I eat? So if you're trying to stay away from those foods, I would recommend to focus on foods low in amines. These are very unlikely to trigger carcinoid symptoms. So fresh lean meats, poultry and fish, fresh lunch meats, so like fresh roasted turkey that you either roast yourself or that you go to a deli where they actually roast the turkey themselves. Most vegetables and fruits are very low. Fresh vegetables and fruits are low in amines. If you want something soy-based, fresh soybeans or soy milk. And then as far as the dairy products that are low in amines, it's just basically fresh. So ricotta cheese, mozzarella cheese, cottage cheese, yogurt, cream cheese. So those would be the foods that are very unlikely to trigger any kind of carcinoid symptoms. So just to summarize, good nutrition is essential to health. We are what we eat, so we always want to think about that. And nutrition is really a vital component of your treatment tolerance, side effect management, and quality of life for NET patients. I recommend that you ask to be referred to a registered dietitian that specializes in oncology nutrition. So you want to look for somebody that's a CSO. They have some here at Stanford, and they have us up at UCSF to help you optimize your nutritional status. And then for some resources, I wanted to just point out the oncologynutrition.org. So if you aren't at one of the major cancer centers, but you want to meet with a certified specialist in oncology nutrition, you can find us at oncologynutrition.org. So that's a good website. And then I have some books and cookbooks that might be helpful for you. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me today, and good luck in your journey.